When we think about childbirth, the activity that we're doing, and we come through that experience and explain to other people what our experience was like, do you have an understanding of what those stories are comprised of? In other words, we often hear that stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. However, in childbirth, they actually have elements. When I first gave birth in 1970, there were 4 elements to the birth stories that most of us told. When I gave birth last in 1982, there were only 3 elements that most of us told. When I started my involvement of childbirth in the 1970s, I had no idea that 50 years later, I would be creating this course for an international nonprofit chiropractic group that works with pregnant women. At the same time, I was living the experience of the societal conversation around childbirth in the 70s and the 80s. And common sense would tell you that I've learned a lot from having been involved in a particular topic for an extended period of time. And when I lived the 4 elements of birth stories in the 70s and discovered in the 1980s that women were only telling 3 elements, this was curious. In hindsight now, I can explain to you why it matters. So let's think about the 3 elements in childbirth. What's the most common thing that you hear women say when they describe their birth? That's time factor. They'll say, my water bag broke at 6 p.m. Or we got in the car to go to the hospital at 9 in the morning. Or I gave birth at 4 in the afternoon. Or I pushed for hours. We know that time element is bonded to every birth story. It's ubiquitous. There's no woman who tells a birth story that doesn't tell something about the time frame that occurred. The second element is often what they did or didn't do to me. My husband was great, or my husband just absolutely sucked. He didn't know what to do. Or I was given a rough internal. Or my midwife told me she wouldn't do an internal at home, but she insisted. Or the doctors rushed me. Or the doctors were very patient. So we often hear the stories of what they did and didn't do to me. That colors the memory that women have about their experiences with their partner and their care providers. The third element is what women experience and what they feel. I'd back labor for hours. Or my contractions weren't so bad. I could manage them. Or I didn't realize that I was going to poop when I delivered my baby. Or I just screamed the whole time. So those 3 elements, time frame, what they did and didn't do to me, and what we experience individually, those are stories we tell over and over and over again about our child's birth. And those were the stories that were told in the 1980s and today. What you liked and what you didn't like, and how this one-off, infrequent, life-transforming experience has impacted your life. However, when I gave birth in 1970, we had a 4th element. And people should have been listening to that, and they weren't, because the goals of that childbirth trend, which was skills-based, we lacked choices, was for low-risk women to have a natural birth, pain-free labor without medical care. But so many millions of us were taking the Lamaze classes for a generation that even though we were not low risk, and even though we didn't have a natural birth, and didn't have a pain-free labor, and had it in and around all the medical assessments, monitoring, and procedures, the 4th element to many of our birth stories at that time was the breathing skills really helped. My husband had skills, and he was able to help me when I needed him to. I really tried to relax. It was hard, but at least I made an effort. Or the breathing skills didn't adjust well, and I found that really frustrating, so I stopped using them. But that 4th element, that skills-based element, is not what you hear any longer. And we want to bring it back. Why do we want to bring it back? Because there are some global truths. 100% of pregnant women are going to give birth one way or another. Giving birth is a dramatic, dynamic, intense, life-transforming experience, and we remember it. And when we tell birth stories that don't talk about our empowerment, that don't explain again and again and again how we coped, managed, dealt with, handled, worked through, stayed on top of, and felt in control as we did the activity, then we are missing something within our societies. And when we can't tell stories of how well fathers or others helped us maintain ourselves and stay in control, we are missing something in our families and our societies. So let's bring back the fourth element. And how do we do that? It's simple. If you're a birth professional listening to this, encourage all of your clients to self-learn some birth and birth coaching skills and make up a handout of the different skills-based methods you know and just have them choose any one or ones that they want. And if you see them regularly, then just drop into your notes what skills-based method they're learning and what skills they've learned if you see them once a month. And after the birth, debrief them. If you're at the birth with them and they're coping well and managing well, praise them. If they look like they're not coping well and you go back to the notes and they learn skills, remind them to use skills. Because many women will say, but the birth changed. It isn't what I thought it was going to be like. So I stopped using my skills. And you want to remind them, it's your baby's birth. Work through your baby's birth journey with the skills you have. And that's what Birthing Better Families did. We learned skills that we had created and we worked through our baby's birth journey together. If you're just an expectant mother listening to this, pick whatever skills-based method you want, but make certain that it has skills for your partner. If they're going to be with you at the birth, share skills together from your two unique and important roles. If they're not going to be with you at the birth, have them help you learn the skills so that you know that they are involved and invested in this. We can bring back the fourth element, the one that tells us we have a self-learning, skilled birthing population around the world for millions and millions of women to remember that they birthed better because they had skills.